continue doing so. On the other hand, those sparks of truth, intuition, love, joy, creativity, and accomplishment gained now will work for you then as they do now. They are, you see, the only true reality. They are the only real foundations of existence. It is foolish, as Rupert once said, to hate a storm or take your fists at it and call it names. You may laugh if you think of children in such activities. It is useless to personify a storm and treat it as a demon, focusing upon its destructive elements, or those elements that you appear destructive. Change of form is not destructive. The explosive energy of a storm is highly creative. Consciousness is not annihilating. Storm is part of creativity. You view it from your own perspective. And yet, one individual will feel within the storm the unending cycle of creativity, and another will personify it as the work of the devil. Through all your lives, you will interpret the reality that you see in your own way, and that way will have its effect upon you, and in turn upon others. The man who literally hates immediately sets himself up in this fashion. He prejudges the nature of reality according to his own limited understanding. Now, I am emphasizing the issue of hate as I discuss reincarnation because its results can be so disastrous. A man who hates always believes himself justified. He never hates anything that he believes to be good. He thinks he is being just, therefore, in his hatred. But the hatred itself forms a very strong claim that will follow him throughout his life until he learns that only the hatred itself is the destroyer. Now, let's speak of the dimensions of God and of the specific. As the present life of any individual rises from hidden dimensions beyond those easily accessible in physical terms, and as it draws its energy and power to act from unconscious sources, so does the present physical universe, as you know it, rise from other dimensions. So does it have its source and derive its energy from deeper reality. History, as you know it, represents but one single light upon which you focus. You interpret the events that you see therein, and you project upon its glimmer your interpretation of the events that may occur. So entranced is your concentration that when you wonder about the nature of reality, you automatically confine your question to this one small flickering moment that you call physical reality. When you ponder upon the aspects of God, you unthinkingly speak of the creator of that one light. That light is unique, and if you truly understood what it was, you would indeed understand the nature of true reality. Only a portion of your entire identity is, presently, familiar to you, as you know. Therefore, when you consider the question of a supreme being, you imagine a male personality with those abilities that you yourself possess, with great emphasis upon qualities you admire. Imagined God has therefore changed throughout your centuries, mirroring man's shifting ideas of himself. God was seen as cool and powerful when man believed that these were desirable characteristics, needed particularly in his battle for physical survival. He projected these upon his idea of a God because he envied them and feared them. You have cast your idea of God, therefore, in your own image. In a reality that is inconceivably multidimensional, the old concepts of God are relatively meaningless. Even the term supreme being is in itself distorted, for you naturally project the qualities of human nature upon it. If you will try to accept the idea that your own existence is multidimensional, that you dwell within the medium of infinite probabilities, then you may catch a slight glimpse of the reality that is behind the word God. And you may understand why it is almost impossible to capture a true understanding of that concept in words. God, therefore, is first of all a creator, not of one physical universe, but of an infinite variety of probable existences, far more vast than those aspects of the physical universe with which your scientists are familiar. He did not simply send the sun to live and die on one small planet. He is a part of all probability. There have been parables told and stories of beginnings. All of these have been attempts to transmit knowledge in as simple terms as possible. Often, answers were given to questions that literally have no meaning outside of your own system of reality. For example, there was no beginning, and there will be no end. Yet parables have been given telling you of beginnings and endings, simply because with your distorted ideas of time, beginnings and endings seem to be inseparable, valid events. Your Christ figure represents, symbolically, your idea of God and his relationship. There were three separate individuals whose history blended, and they became known collectively as Christ. Hence, many discrepancies in your record. These were all male, because at that time of your development, you would not have accepted a female counterpart. These individuals were a part of one entity. You could not but imagine God as a father. It would never have occurred to you to imagine a God in any other than human terms, earth components. The events of the crucifixion of Christ, as they are recorded, did not occur in history. It was a psychic, but not a physical event. Ideas of almost unimaginable magnitude were played out. Judas, for example, was not a man in your terms. He was, like all the other disciples, a blessed, created fragment personality, formed by the Christ personality. He represented the self-betrayer. He dramatized a portion of each individual's personality that focuses upon physical reality in a grasping manner and denies the inner self out of greed. Each of the 12 represented qualities of personality that belonged to one individual, and Christ as you know him represented the inner self. The 12, therefore, plus Christ as you know him, the one figure composed of the three, represented an individual earthly personality. That is, the inner self and 12 main characteristics connected with the egotistical self. As Christ was surrounded by the disciples, so the inner self is surrounded by these physically oriented characteristics, each drawn outward toward daily reality on the one hand, and yet orbiting the inner self. The disciples, therefore, were given physical reality by the inner self, as all of your earthly characteristics come out of your inner nature. This was a living parable, made flesh among you, a cosmic play worked out for your behalf, couched in terms that you could understand. The lessons were made plain, as all the ideas behind them were personified. If you will forgive the term, this was like a local morality play, put on in your corner of the universe. This does not mean it was less real than you previously supposed. In fact, the implications of what is said here should clearly hint at the more powerful aspects of godhood. The same kinds of dramas in different ways have been given, and while the drama is always different, it is always the same. This does not mean that a Christ has appeared.
Manifold will have, in general, a continuum of points, an infinite number of points, I guess an uncountable infinite number of points. So you can imagine those points of your manifold being the elements of the group. So this is what you really mean by a continuous group. And now, of course, it's not only enough to have a collection of points, but you have to have, when you have a Lie group, when you compose two group elements, that composition rule has to be compatible with the analytical structure of your manifold. So you have to add some more structure to it. But let me just give you an example. Let me keep going. Okay, so a Lie group is a group whose group elements are specified by one or more continuous parameters, which vary smoothly. You know, let us consider, for example, the group of rotation in 2 dimensions. You know, so the group is parameterized by the angle. You know, let's suppose that you're going to rotate. You're going to perform a rotation in 2 dimensions, and that rotation is going to be specified by the angle theta. So in 2 dimensions, you're going to have a 2 by 2 matrix, and the rotation matrix is going to be given by the entries of this matrix. Notice that when you take the terminal of this matrix, you take you're going to have cosine square minus, you're going to have cosine square plus the sine square equals to 1. So the determinant of this matrix is equal to 1. This is what you call the special rotation group in 2 dimensions, because the determinant of the matrix is 1. And this is what people use the label a special, the SON. You have a special means the determinant equals to 1. And here you see this is a finite rotation because the angle is a finite angle. Now let's suppose that this angle were infinitesimal, an infinitesimal angle. So in that case, the Lie algebra is what is the mathematical structure that underlies the infinitesimal group structure. In this example, there is a matrix generator of the Lie algebra associated to your group. And the matrix generator is given by this matrix. You notice that this matrix, X, has an I and minus I of the diagonal. This matrix is, in this case, Hermitian. Remember what we call a Hermitian matrix? It's a matrix that, yeah. So here, when you have the Hermitian of a matrix is you take the transpose of the matrix, you flip I with minus I, and then you take the complex conjugate. So a Hermitian matrix, what you do is you do two things. You perform the transpose of the matrix, and then you take the complex conjugate of that. And this is what you call the Hermitian of a matrix. Now, a matrix is Hermitian in this case because you see that minus I is the complex conjugate of I. And I is the complex conjugate of minus I. Okay? So when you look at along the main diagonal, you'll see that these elements are the complex conjugates of each other. So in this case, this matrix is Hermitian. You know. Are you familiar with this, Fang? You recall what you mean by Hermitian matrix and the transpose? Yeah. Okay. So when you see a matrix like this, you look at the diagonal, and if the entries of the diagonal are complex conjugates of each other, then you know that the matrix is Hermitian. You know, that's the simplest way to see it. No. Yeah. Yes. Let me go back. Yeah, I'll go back. Yeah. 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 Yes. Yes.
And the discreteness of the group.
Yeah. Well, here I'm talking about a continuously group. Imagine in this room we have 3 dimensions. We have 3 axes. So the dimension of the group is 3-dimensional. Like in this room we have 3 axes, so it's 3 dimensions. Now, how many points do we have in this room? We have an infinity of points. Okay? So one has to be very careful. The order of the group in that case is the number of points in your manifold, which is infinite. The dimension of the group has to do with the dimension of this room, which is 3 dimensions because we have 3 axes. Okay? So
this is not an example of a discrete group.
No. It's a continuum group.
So these groups are not examples of discrete groups.
No. It's the continuous analog of a discrete group.
So when you mentioned discrete groups, you were talking about discrete groups in general.
In general.
Not particularly
Yeah.
applicable to these groups.
Yes. So then I want to go from the notion of discrete group, how you jump from that notion, from the discrete to a continuum. That's what I was doing. Imagine that you have a discrete set of points in this room. If you have a discrete set of points, that will be a discrete group. But if you have a continuum of points, that will be a continuous Lie group. Okay.
If I impose
Yeah.
a strain on my theta,
Yeah.
to take on integral multiples,
Yeah.
that would be a group?
Well, in that case, if the theta parameter is discrete, that will be your discretization of your continuous group. No. It will, no.
But is there a notion of it?
You could have, I guess you call them algebraic groups. Remember, you have to have a composition rule. You have to make sure that the product of one matrix with the other is going to give you another matrix that belongs to your group. So you have to be very careful. When you imagine you give the theta parameter discrete values, yeah? You have to be very careful. You have to make sure that when you multiply one matrix by the other, another matrix that belongs to your set, okay? That will impose constraints on your theta parameters. You have to be very careful. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, then you have to, imagine you multiply the 2 matrices together. You're going to have the cosine of theta 1 times the cosine of theta 2, minus theta 1 times theta 2. Yeah. No, but remember, when you have theta has one value, theta sub 1, and if theta has another value, theta sub 2, then you have to be careful. Yeah. So you have to make sure that when you multiply those matrices, when you are going to have a matrix that belongs to your set. So you have to be very careful. No, well, I guess it will be a group, not a group, because the parameter has to be continuous. Yes, the parameter. Yeah.
Say the de-algebraic mathematical structure that analyzes decimal groups.
Yeah. I'm going to go through. I'm going to in more detail. Yes. 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 Okay, this is the generator that generates infinitesimal translations along one axis. Okay. Yes. For example, here in the blackboard, imagine I have the z-axis and have an angle. In that case, I write theta sub 3 because I'm specifying the third axis. But imagine if I perform a rotation around one axis only. So the generator of those rotations around this axis will be given by yeah, no, rotations, yeah. Is this clear? Yeah, is this clear? Okay, let me. Okay, is this what I was, this is back? Okay. Okay, what do I mean by exponentiation of a Lie algebra element? Here, for example, that's what I'm going to write here. Yes. So here, let's suppose here I have the element of my group, which is a 2 by 2 matrix, and I want to